We owe it to the country to cover him with clear, open eyes. This isn't about access or normalized, homogenized politics or the pageantry of succession. We need to cover the next president with the same cynicism that the current president was treated to, and with the same zeal and skepticism and doggedness that we expended on, Hillary's emails. Given how unprecedented what is happening is, including his veiled and not so veiled threats against the First Amendment, maybe we need to cover him with more toughness and skepticism.
You saw her right there. You're about to see her right here on camera in our studio here at the Tisch WNET studio. She is Joy-Ann Reid, the host of MSNBC's AM Joy, seen every Saturday from 10 to 12 noon on MSNBC. How you doing?
I'm wonderful, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. We had you here. By the way, you are the author of this book. You mind if I...
Oh, no, not at all.
Still relevant, interesting. Fracture. Barack Obama, the Clintons, and the racial divide. Yeah, there might still be a bit of a divide in our country.
A little bit.
So we had you here in the studio talking about the election a while back. Mm-hmm. We saw you right there on your network. Talk to us about what you see as we move into 2017 when this show will be seen again. Where is the country?
You know, it's interesting. One of the things that that Fracture focused on was this sense of backlash that you had both after, we've had them in each of what I call our sort of Reconstruction periods. After the Civil War, you had this period of Reconstruction and sort of attempts at racial reconciliation that resulted in a steep backlash, particularly by white Southerners. Then you have LBJ happen, you have all these advancements in terms of civil rights around race, and then you have this tremendous backlash to something like 30 years that eventually drives Democrats into the wilderness, and only Bill Clinton brings them back. And I think after the Obama years, there has been a similar backlash. You've had a lot of Americans see the last 8 years as this wonderful progressive moment. But you had other Americans see it as sort of whisking away the country that they knew. These emphases on rights for African Americans, rights for LGBT Americans, on sort of new ideological ideas, multiculturalism, racial and also religious ecumenism, were disturbing to a lot of Americans. And I think you've seen both in Western Europe and now in the United States a tremendous backlash, a sort of ethno-nationalist backlash that has swept in these governments, both in the UK and now in the US.
With Donald Trump as president, A, what is your greatest concern? And B, what do those who are concerned about the issues that you just described, where do they go and what do they do for the next 4 years?
Well, I think the
loaded question, I know.
Yeah, I think Americans have been accustomed to seeing our country as this sort of unique island in sort of the rest of the world. But now we really have to start thinking of the United States as a part of the world, as a part of the West. And what you're seeing across the West, and what concerns me most, is that you see these movements that are basically sort of cloaked in populism about this idea that economically the economic and political elite have taken away sort of the future of the working class. But they've been tied into anti-immigrant sentiments, anti-Islamic sentiments, and ethno-nationalist sentiments. And that's sweeping across the West. And now it's here in the United States. The biggest concern I have is that that tremendously benefits Russia as an adversary. Russia has been meddling in these Western governments, meddling in these elections. They did it here, sort of trafficking in made-up news, trafficking in, the kinds of destabilizing things like hacking. And so now that that's happening here, too, and you have in the United States, as in some other Western countries, these sort of pro-Putin governments coming into power, what does that mean for the stability of the West, for the stability of Western democracies? You now have Germany as sort of the last standing sort of pluralistic small d democracy in the West, with the United States going in the direction of Putinism. So I'm very concerned that Donald Trump's international business ties, the affinity of himself and many of his team for Putin and for Russia, what does that mean for the stability of the West? And what does that mean, quite frankly, for an American government to be that tied into an individual's business interests around the world? It's very concerning.
But let me turn it around this way and bring it closer to home. The other side of that, Joy. To what extent Hillary Clinton and many in the Democratic establishment, to what extent did they just miss, if not ignore, a significant portion of this country, disproportionately white, not just all men, some well-educated white women who were drawn to what Donald Trump was selling And why did they do that?
Yeah, I think that we all missed it. I think that both the media, the political elite, the media elite, and definitely the Clinton campaign missed it. Because I think what we've seen is an over-reliance on data as a predictor of behavior. And what I mean by that is that the Clinton campaign went in with this conceit that we in the media had too, that what the white working class believed and what white voters with a college degree believed and would do were completely divergent. And that as long as you had a settled white college-educated vote, that it didn't matter really that you had this white non-college vote out there because it wasn't large enough to carry Trump into the presidency. So all the decisions the Clinton campaign made, whether it was picking Tim Kaine as a way to govern as opposed to as a winning pick, whether it was trying to go and poach Republican suburban women voters rather than making sure that they had Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Never went to Wisconsin.
Never went to Wisconsin.
How arrogant was that?
Incredibly. The assumption that you had these states in the bag so that you could spend your time attempting to poach red states rather than nailing down your own state.
No, excuse me for interrupting, Joy. What did it say to those people in Wisconsin?
Yeah, and I think what you had was a lot of white working class voters saying, well, Clinton doesn't care about us. You know, with my show, we went to Lorain, Ohio,
I know you did.
And we talked to steelworkers, Democrats who'd voted for Barack Obama, who were all sort of leaning in the direction of Trump because to their mind, anti-trade messages spoke to them. Hillary Clinton didn't.
So stay on that. So the whole thing about the racial, there are people who said if you voted for Trump, you were a racist. But some of them voted for Barack Obama. Isn't that square that for me?
Well, it actually is essentially a vote for change. And the change candidate in any election is who was winning over these white working class voters. So in 2008, when they saw the financial world collapse, they voted against the candidate they voted for the change candidate, against what they saw as the elite. Away from the Bush candidate, right? Away from the Republican Party, who were seen as causing the economic and housing collapse. So Barack Obama was the change candidate. In 2016, Hillary Clinton was the establishment and Trump was the change candidate. But the racial factor is important because whether it's in Western Europe, whether it's in Britain or here, these voters set aside the ethnocentrism, the ethno-nationalism, in some cases the racism and the sexism of the candidate. They set it aside. They were at least willing to vote for somebody who espoused those sentiments. And you are seeing this rise of a sense of sort of racial solidarity among white voters, where if they're not actively voting for someone who they see as advancing the interests of white Americans, of people like them, they're at least willing to set aside those messages to vote for the change candidate and the candidate they think will be anti-trade and anti-immigration.
So what do we do with that? I mean, what do we do with that? I mean, think about that.
I think the risk here is that if you are a person of color, if you are Black, Hispanic, if you are a DREAM Act kid, if you are Muslim, you have very real reasons to be afraid right now, Steve. I don't mean to be alarmist, but there are real reasons to be afraid, both because Donald Trump's election has empowered people who now feel that they have the right to act out against you. You're seeing it happen. There's a thing called Trumping that's taking place in elementary schools, in schools where boys, particularly white young boys, feel that they now have the right to abuse children of color, abuse girls, and they say that they call it Trumping. Trump's name has become an epithet to be hurled at people of color. People are literally being assaulted, and the reaction of people on the pro-Trump side is to say that doesn't matter. Ignore it. And so the fact that no one on the Trump side is concerned about or seems to care that this is happening, up to and including Trump himself, who said, well, he didn't cause the divisiveness, that means nothing's going to be done about
Joy,
it.
devil's advocate. I see Trump look into the camera and say, stop, don't do that. And you smile, that's not enough? What? Help us on this.
Yeah.
Because he will argue, A, those people aren't really carrying out the message that he wants is to bring people together. B, he said, stop it. Not enough, you say. And B, then what is? What should he be doing to truly bring people together and try to curtail some of that?
If you ran a campaign in which you led chants of lock her up, in which you said, I'll pay the legal bills of a person at your rally who sucker punched a Black protester. If you say, well, back in the day, those people would have been carted off, very George Wallace-like language. If you run a campaign that is actively
or if he
encouraging,
mocked a disabled person,
mocking
said
a disabled
he did not,
person. Yeah.
But the videotape is there.
Right, or questioning a judge's fitness to serve because of his Mexican heritage.
Because his parents were Mexican.
That's right. And if that is the kind of campaign you run, looking into the camera one time and sort of gently saying, stop it, it's not even close to enough. Donald Trump has now done 2 thank you rallies.
As we speak right now. There'll be many more.
Yeah, and in none of those rallies has he called on the white supremacist supporters to back down, say he doesn't want their support. He's never used the same vigor, the same Twitter use. All of the ways that he communicates, he's never used those in the service of healing. He's only used them in the service of aggrandizement and of whipping up his supporters because he obviously enjoys that kind of endorsement and that kind of adulation. He hasn't used his platforms at all to bring the country together.
So those of us in the media, you and your colleagues at MSNBC, folks at CNN, folks at Fox, other platforms, those of us in public broadcasting, what do you see our role being if we want to play a meaningful, positive role and be helpful right now?
This is an incredible challenge. The media has never faced a candidate like Donald Trump or indeed a president like Trump.
He's not a candidate.
Right. And you've never faced someone who, number one, doesn't use the media in a traditional way. He doesn't give press conferences and may never. He uses things like social media to get around the press. There's no curation of the things he says.
I'm sorry for interrupting. By the time this show airs, I'm hoping that's not accurate.
Yeah.
Meaning I hope he does hold a press conference, but go ahead.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to tell whether he will follow through on anything he says because he simply speaks through Twitter, speaks through social media, and also, quite frankly, his tendency to say things that are just false. How do you deal with that when you're in the media? If he says that he did a deal with Carrier, that the facts don't pan out, you have to deal with that falsehood right up front because once he gets his own message out, his supporters are only going to believe him. They're not going to believe us.
So what are we going to do? What do we do to be fair to him, to want him to succeed on behalf of the country, because we are in this together, but also be as skeptical, not cynical, but skeptical, which is our role, to be challenging? Go ahead.
It's going to be difficult because I think the media has a symbiotic relationship with Donald Trump. He's also a source of clicks. He's a source of eyeballs, a source of viewers. He entertains the media in a certain way. And the media has this need for him because he won't give as much of himself as a normal politician
And respectfully,
does.
some of your colleagues have had him on, and had him on early on, unedited, not challenged. You know what I'm talking about.
The unfiltered Trump rally is sort of almost like a drug for the media in general. The tweet by Donald Trump is sort of like a drug, right? To every media writer, every headline writer, those are the only communications he gives you, so everyone sort of drinks them in. I think the media is going to have to wean itself off that drug, and they're going to have to start to train Trump the way he's training us. People need to make the new administration understand that they don't have unlimited access to our airwaves if we don't have at least some access to an interrogatory with the president.
He's good at this.
Yeah. And he's
Donald
better
Trump
at it than most of the media.
He is better. He understands the game.
Yep.
He understands what many in the media. In some ways, I don't want to be an elitist, but I want to think that we in public television have a different approach. But we're part of it. I don't want to. Many of your colleagues will just take them.
Absolutely.
But he's the president, though. It's different. You have to show the level of respect.
And he also has the trust of his supporters in a way that the media doesn't even have close.
Can I plug your show one more time? Do you
Please
mind?
do.
Speaking of branding and plugging, that's okay with you?
Absolutely.
When can folks catch MSNBC's AM Joy?
Well, we are on weekend mornings, Saturdays and Sundays, 10 a.m. to noon. And what we're trying to do is to explain Donald Trump. Not just give him lots of airtime, but explain what's going on. We try to be factual. We're definitely trying to be fair. But I think the media also has to be challenging. You have to be challenging.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Stay with us. We'll be right back right after this.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Wells Fargo, Caldwell University, Suez, Ready for the Resource Revolution, Hackensack Meridian Health, Hackensack University Medical Center Foundation, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, and by Century 21 Construction. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.